Roy, how did you get into astrology?
Well, there's a short story, the long story, but basically, I mean, I was always interested in the heavens and looking at the planets moving around the sun from when I was a very little boy, and I always used to tell people I wanted to be an astronomer when I grew up. And particularly when I found out that when you look through a microscope you saw atoms with electrons going around, and I thought the universe was the same inside and outside. And yet, when I started talking to scientists about it, they didn't really know that, and I kind of got lost in the whole business of growing up and becoming a teenager and falling in love and sort of going to my first job and thinking about the world and trying to care for the world. And I didn't see there was any connection between astrology and all that sort of thing, and what I was doing and what I was like, until much later on, when I was in my sort of late 30s, when I had been a school teacher for 10 years, and I was sick and went to a doctor's surgery and met this person who said, "Hey, come round and I'll tell you a little bit about what I do." And he ended up doing my chart and completely changed my whole attitude towards life. And within a very short period of time I was studying the subject, and within about 3 or 4 years I'd given up teaching and become a full-time professional, and that was in 1976.
So how has astrology then impacted your life, both personally and as a career?
Well, you know, there was a lot of difficulties in my life before I had learnt about astrology, particularly, you know, as the latter part of a marriage. And I guess one of the motivations for wanting to learn something different was to try and understand myself better and my circumstances better. And when I studied astrology and realised what had happened in my life in the 5 or 10 years prior, I realised that there was an explanation, and there could have been an answer if I'd been using astrology. And then as I started doing that with other people as well, and particularly as I started using it in the classroom, you know, one had the date of birth. Occasionally you could find out the time of birth, and you started understanding the children's behaviour. And the children that were most difficult, I was teaching in a secondary school and I was responsible for their behaviour as their housemaster. The children who were most difficult were often, you know, you could get through to them once you knew their chart. You couldn't even approach to understand them without knowing their chart. And I thought it was such a tragedy that I couldn't use this knowledge openly in the classroom and in my counselling work with the kids. And it got to such a point that I thought, well, I've got to choose between teaching and astrology. And there's many school teachers, and astrology seemed to be totally misunderstood. So I thought I'd devote my life to exploring, at least for a few years solidly exploring and studying astrology. And that's what I decided to do in 76. I went on a 2-year tour around the world, keeping an astrological diary every day for 2 years, noting where the transits were, watching the heavens, watching the behaviour of other people and my own behaviour. Sometimes I would do what the planets seemed to suggest I ought to do. Sometimes I'd do exactly the opposite of what the planets suggested I should do. And what happened with both methods was really illuminating. And I learnt how astrology worked, and I learnt its validity in so many different ways. So in the middle of all that, of course, I came to start doing interpretations for people. In India, of all places, was when I started actually earning a living as an astrologer, from about 1977 onwards. And, you know, increasingly people found it incredibly useful. And when I look at my own chart, I see just how appropriate it is for astrology, with 4 planets in Aquarius and the Sun, Venus trine the Moon in Gemini in the 7th house. People seem to have found it incredibly useful, as I had. So it just reinforced the correctness of my decision to give up school teaching and become a full-time astrologer.